Welcome to The Story Talks Back. Almost everything that we remember, think about, or imagine is a story. Stories entertain us, inform us, and even define us. They have upsides, and they have downsides. This podcast explores the power of story in every aspect of our lives. I'm Dave Stanton. Thank you for joining us. For over 20 years, from 1978 to 1999, Joan Jeanrenaud was the cellist for Kronos Quartet, participating in the development and premiere of hundreds of original works by Philip Glass, Terry Riley, John Cage, Hamza El Din, John Zorn, Frank Zappa, and many others. She took part in the quartet's meteoric rise and its maturing into a central player in the new music scene, helping to meld avant-garde classical, world music, rock, and jazz into a single mainstream genre. When Jeanrenaud left the quartet, after discovering that she had early-stage multiple sclerosis, she began a new journey as a composer and solo performer. Her 2008 album, Strange Toys, was nominated for a Grammy Award, and she has collaborated with a variety of performers and writers, including Fred Frith and P.C. Munoz. In 2016, Jeanrenaud contributed a piece entitled Knock to the Kronos Quartet's 50 for the Future series. Well, hey, Joan. It's great to have you on The Story Talks Back, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Well, it's great to see you.
Yeah.
Even on Zoom.
Right? Even long distance.
Yes.
So just sort of going back to your childhood and thinking about, your roots, your beginnings, are there any stories about your family or about you that you feel kind of shaped the way you perceive things or that had a real deep influence on you?
Yeah, definitely. And it's really interesting because I hadn't thought about this till just now, really. But when I grew up, it was on a farm in Tennessee, outside Memphis, Tennessee, in Cordova, Tennessee. And we had cotton fields. So we had some cotton pickers. And of course, in the South, and I was born in 1956. So, in the 60s, we had cotton pickers picking our cotton, not combines. And then finally, then they had combines. But anyhow, there was a woman, Lily was her name, Black woman, African-American woman, who, grew up there. I don't know where she even was from originally, but she lived on our farm in a shack. But she was the coolest lady. She made her own soap from lard, from like bacon fat. She made her own soap, and she had pigs, and I don't know. We lived in the country, but we didn't live like she really lived on the country. With the produce from the country and everything. So, but she was, and I didn't think about it till now, but Lily had a huge influence on me, on my life, because, at that time, all that stuff in the South was okay, and obviously not okay, but it was accepted, and I grew up with it. But then I think because I loved Lily so much, and then my next door neighbors had Joe and Vera who lived on their farm, and they were really awesome people. And so, you grow up and you realize these disparities, and you don't really understand why that is. And you don't think of it as a big deal because you just see that person and realize, oh, they're amazing and they mean so much to me. And you don't think of it in any other context, like how much she was making her soap and we were buying ours, but that didn't really enter into it. But then later, as you get older and you start to realize those things, you realize how wrong that is, in my opinion. I think that's, totally unacceptable. And and then things did change in the South, and I saw them change, and obviously now, because of Black Lives Matter, it just makes you realize, well, there's still a lot that hasn't changed, that needs to change. But I was really fortunate, I think, to grow up in this kind of a weird situation where you could actually really appreciate um, this this person, even though her differences at the time were, now they, if you look at Black Lives Matter, it's, she was definitely in that category. I mean, at the
Mm.
very beginning.
So, I mean, how did that experience of the differences and the inequality, do you feel that had a long-term influence on you, even subconsciously?
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it makes you not, hopefully, not judge people as quickly. My mom, I thought, was very prejudiced in a lot of ways,
Mm.
even though she wouldn't have said that she was,
Right.
but I think, so it's something that I saw that way too, that I didn't appreciate, that I thought that she should have much more understanding and tolerance, actually, even when I was in Kronos. And, Hank is gay man. And we had a really good friend, Deborah Serafini, who's a violinist, who we played in a quartet with her in college at IU, actually, Hank and me and Deborah. And Deborah is a lesbian. And so my mother, one time, I just couldn't believe how she treated my friend Deborah. And it was because she was lesbian. And
Mm.
I was just blown away by that. I just could not understand it. And so I don't know. And so even that, you see a lot of that in your lifetime. And I feel fortunate, because I think that's the better way to be, to try and not be judgmental or jump to conclusions about someone because of, yeah, all this stuff, their color, you know, their sexual preference, their, whatever.
Right.
It's like, yeah. So
Right.
anyhow, I don't know if I
There,
answered your question.
no, no, that was interesting. Do you do you remember any stories about you that sort of took hold in your childhood? Things that people said about you or believed about you, or how you were thought of in the family?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I was the third of three girls. And they my mom was the one who was happy that I was playing music,
Mm.
and everybody else was okay with it, but it wasn't a big deal in my family. A lot of families, they grow up, they're musical families, their parents play, the kids play. you know um my father got a stereo, I remember, and he got some Wilson Pickett records, which is great,
Uh-huh.
and Tijuana Brass too. That was both great artists, actually, but very different from anything that I was doing. But my mom, there was a woman who was the music teacher at my high school, which was an all girls high school, because or school. I went there for 13 years. But and the reason is because my mom was a teacher. She taught there. So, and she had three girls, so we all got to go there for free. So it was great. And it was a really good school. And so they had a music teacher when I was in my, teens. I was 11 when I started playing the cello, and she had wanted me to try and play the violin, but it was like, oh, it's way too high and squeaky. So she said, oh, here, try the cello. And so it was great. But so the being a musician in a way had nothing to do with my family, except that they supported it. My mom really supported it. And so I was very fortunate. in that way. Um, but yeah,
I
I
mean,
don't know. I was gonna say, yeah, go ahead.
were you seen as somehow rebellious or different?
Oh, no, 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 not rebellious.
No.
More a little cuckoo. I was the spaced out musician. I was the, you know, and I think a lot of it too was because I was the youngest in the family, and but and I did get a lot of, I got a lot of encouragement, especially from all my teachers
Mhm.
when I was playing music, and so that was a whole nother set of people in my life. And so my family, they would come to a concert, my mom and maybe my dad, but it was not a big deal. And I never considered that a problem. It's like, well, they should do what they want, and it's but so that but that becomes your kind of position in the family. It was I would And it's true, I'm kind of very agreeable person. I go along with a lot of things, and don't make waves. And so, you know so I was just a kid going along playing music, and everybody was fine with it. But if anything, I was probably, more abnormal for that. And then especially then when I went to music school, and that was my major in college. And then I joined Kronos. Well, then I went to Geneva, Switzerland, and studied.
Mm.
And then I joined Kronos. And all that was very fortunate that I got to do all of that, which obviously I have my parents to thank for supporting all that. But yeah, it was not like I think in the end too, I found out after my mom died, which she was 94. And she had a great life. But I found out really from my sister that my mom used to do this thing where she would run into people, and she'd be with my two sisters, Susan and Mary. And all she would do was talk about, oh, Joan did this, Joan did that, she was in the paper, blah, blah, blah. And of course, my sisters, if anything, that just would turn them off, be like, well, we've done stuff too. Why don't you talk about us? And so that revealed a lot. And I realized, well, that was really bad on my mom's part, I think. I mean, I'm glad and she was never that way with me. It was like she was the kind of mom where nothing was ever good enough. So she was completely opposite with them. And so finally, my sister and I had this conversation, and it was like, oh, wow. We both had a different understanding of each other after that. It was made a lot of things kind of clear, that, so that was not a good trait from the whole, musician, normal
Was,
person thing.
was there anybody in your family who was into storytelling or who liked to tell stories, or people around you?
I had a grandfather who he didn't really tell stories, but he would tell like limericks, those kind of things.
Uh,
But no storytellers. Yeah.
so how did you said you started to play the cello at 11, but how did you sort of find your way to music? Like, how did that kind of evolve, even
Well,
before the
see,
cello?
this again, it's really my mom, she thought, I think she thought, oh, maybe she had wanted to be a musician, I think, at one point, and then realized, well, no, that wasn't something she could do
Mm.
necessarily. Um, so, sh- so she had even encouraged me earlier on. I was taking piano lessons, but it was when I was at this school that I went to,
Mm.
and so at that time I was pretty young. I was probably 7 or 8, something like that. And my lessons were during my recess hour. So I would always forget, you know. And then finally and I remember because our we had our school, and then right outside was the kind of playground. And then right beyond that was this little house where I went to take my lessons. It was like a little cottage thing, you know. So the last time I forgot to take my, you know, that I had my lesson, I finally remembered, and I was walking over there and I see her leaving and I realized, oh, she's given up on me, you know. So that was the end of my piano career. But I was never a good pianist because it was interesting. I could never read the bass clef. I would always read the treble clef, and I would sort of do things by ear, but I wasn't really reading the bass clef. And then, of course, you know, I play the cello, which is mostly in the bass clef, but completely different beast.
So what do you think drew you to the cello?
I think it was definitely the sound of the cello.
Mm.
Um, and, you know, I think right away that's why I had refused to play the violin, because I really don't particularly like that um, that sound, you know, that range of sound.
Interesting.
But then, you know, the cello actually plays up in the violin range. I mean, the cello. Then, of course, you know, having started playing the cello and enjoying it and had great teachers, you know, then I and then being in Kronos, which was a whole nother great teacher, you know, for those 20 years. I mean, it's like I really learned a lot about that instrument all inside and out, kind of, you know. I mean, it's you know, you can make so many different kinds of sounds and you can make it sound like so many different kinds of instruments. I have a girl now that I'm teaching. She's 13, and it's really interesting because you know, I've even because, and it's also because a lot of the COVID-19, so now we're doing lessons, you know, like online.
Right.
And so but I've had her start to compose a little bit, you know. And so it's very interesting, and really explore. She sort of had a breakthrough, and it was like, yep, that, you know, she realized this you know, how there's so many octaves on the cello, you know, that you can play. And we were even talking about that. She even said, oh, this is really violin range, isn't it? I said, yes, it is. I said, you're really high up there. And that it was hard because, you know, you're in thumb position way up there. But she was doing it and she got it, you know, so it was very cool. And so that's been really nice to see also, you know, when you have knowledge that you can give to someone and then you see it sort of click and make
Right.
sense, you know.
Do you, I mean, do you have the sense that the cello is like a certain kind of character? Would you say that the cello has a certain personality?
Yeah, I would actually. Though I used to name my cellos. I had Clarissa, but then I had, and Bubba cello was finally mine. But yeah, I think they certainly they have so much character and history, and you know, um it's yeah, it's an amazing thing, that instrument, you know, I think. But so many lifetimes that people have experienced with it, you know. And somehow, you know, that all is kind of in there, I think,
Uh-huh.
you know.
Does your cello now, I mean, if you were to describe it as a person, do you have any sense of what its qualities would be like?
Oh my goodness, there'd be so many. It'd be like I don't know, it might have to be a, you know, three-headed thing or something. Minotaur, are they minotaurs? What are minotaurs? But you know, something very complex
Uh,
with a lot of stuff going on.
I was thinking about, you as a girl, choosing to play the cello at a young age in the 60s, you know. I mean, the cello in a way is not as ladylike to me as the violin, which you can sort of play politely. But to me, to play the cello, you've got to be kind of more of a boss, you know. You got it right here.
Yeah.
Does
Well,
that
for
did anybody ever comment on that to you, or did you ever have that thought?
oh sure. Well, I mean a lot of things. First of all, you have to spread your legs to play the cello. So when you're a woman, you know that is a certain connotation there. Um, and I had people, you know, guys talk to me about that, you know, and be like, "Oh God, just dude, give it up. It's okay," you know. But then I think there was something else I was going to tell you, not about well, and just the you. I think a lot of things like the cello is very rhythmical. I think like for instance in the quartet, it sort of provided the role of the bass and the drums,
Right.
you know, so it's like that and holds things together and you know and so and even the shape of the instrument, all of that sort of implies that sort of heaviness, groundedness, kind of, I guess you'd say. um but yeah, it's and there are so many personalities and aspects to it too. I mean, you know, the fact that you can play, you know, really early music and just have it be the perfect sound for that, you know, but then you can play, you know, stuff now that's I don't know, Xenakis or uh a lot of so many different things. You know, any kind of jazz or pop or I mean, just think how many cellos now are in rock bands, you
Right.
know.
Right.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then there's the rock bands with the cellos like Apocalyptica, who's great, you
Right.
know. And
We saw them.
oh,
That
did you? Oh wow.
was
I've
awesome.
never seen them live, but they must have been awesome.
That
Yeah.
was awesome. That was right before the pandemic, actually. That was my
Oh,
last
was it really? Wow, where'd you see them?
in Jersey, Red Bank, New
Oh
Jersey.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Did any of them do their hair, you know?
Oh my God, it was such a show. It was like a Broadway show, really. But
Wow.
it was so well done. It was never monotonous, or it was actually better than Metallica.
Well, there you go. And they play a lot of Metallica, don't they? Or do they play all of all
It's all Metallica.
Metallica?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was going to be talking to you about Metallica. Uh,
But they're great. No, I love that. You know who turned me on to Apocalyptica was Larry Oakes with
huh.
the Rova Saxophone Quartet.
Nice.
And so, because we were improvising a bunch, probably like in the 2000s, you know, and he said, "Oh, you should check these guys out." You know, it was like, "Wow."
So, I mean, you develop yourself as an individual musician. You know, you did a lot to. You went to Switzerland, um, and then you joined Kronos, and you really, um, you know, you threw yourself into a situation where you were one in four voices, but you still obviously have, you know, very much your own character, your own playing style. Everybody in the group has their own playing style. So,
Right.
I mean, what was it like to sort of try and express yourself, you know, tell your story in a sense as just one voice in a quartet?
Oh well, you know, I never maybe thought of it quite that way, um, because because I always felt like I was able to express myself, and I really felt that Kronos helped me express myself. You
Hmm.
know, I think all the stuff that I did with Kronos was like super awesome, you know, and super, you know, we would talk, of course, about all this stuff, and we would talk about phrasing and where the whole, you know, where the piece was going, or that, you know, how you wanted to play a certain thing. I mean, of course, you talk a lot about bowing and articulation and dynamics and you know pitch and you know I mean it's endless, but the whole thing was really in the effort of trying to produce this statement of a piece of music and present it as as best we felt it could be presented, you know, the best that we uh, thought it could happen from us, you know. Um, and so I think that that's influenced me so much. I mean, all the things that I've done have influenced me so much. I mean, the first guy, Peter Spurbeck, because the woman that started me on the violin, you know, she didn't play the cello. I mean, started me on the cello. She didn't play the cello, play the violin. So she said, "Oh, go to Memphis State, study with this guy who was great."
Hmm.
And then he took told me to go to his teacher, Fritz Mogg at Indiana University, and then I went to study with Pierre Fournier, and then Kronos. And so if you look at all those things, it's like, wow, it was such a great education in every instance. And what I learned from every person or group of people in Kronos's case, you know, I mean, Hank and I played together. We both, our teachers at IU played in a quartet together. So I've always felt really close with Hank, not only as a person, but as a player. The two of us play in a very similar manner.
Mm.
And part of it is because our teachers were very close and had influenced each other. So
that's interesting.
yeah. So yeah, there's so many influences at this point because I've been around so long, you know. So
But just to get back to the quartet, I mean, what is it like to everything that you do in the quartet really is a group effort. You know, it's
mhm.
like I remember once I happened to see you play um, an Elliott Carter piece
Ooh.
by yourself. It was,
Oh, the solo.
yeah, there was a soloist who couldn't make it to the show, and I think you wound up subbing for him or something.
Oh,
And I was
wow.
so struck by seeing you on your own, you know, uh,
Oh, wow.
unexpectedly. And, you know, I saw you in a way that I never saw you as part of the quartet.
Right, right.
Did you ever feel like that was something you wanted to do more of when you were in the quartet?
Not really. No, I was very content as a string quartet player. Um, you know, I mean, as an ensemble player, and I think I always had been because even when I grew up, you know, I had two friends, a violist and a violinist, and we played trios. And I mean, I always really liked playing chamber music more than anything, really.
Really
Um, yeah,
interesting.
you know, or music with small numbers of people, I think, you know. Um, and and so in a sense, I mean, because like even when I went to IU, you know, you're required, I think, in your 4 years of getting a bachelor of music degree, that you have to do 4 semesters of string quartet. Well, I took string quartet every semester I was there,
Wow.
and I was there for 4 years, you know, just
Uh-huh.
because I wanted to, you know, and it was great and I loved it. And so and I played a lot of new music when I was also in all these places, like even in Memphis State, because there were these composers, and composers are always looking for people to play their music. So I played some music of some guys who were composers in the you know, university department, and yeah. And then when I was at IU, same thing, you know. So um, I was part of a um, actually I think it was the first new music ensemble at IU, which seems hard to believe because that was probably 75, maybe 76, something like that. And I remember we played Russell Davies' 8 songs for a Mad King, which I just thought was just the coolest thing, you know, because we had sets and things, you know. So it
Okay.
was great. So I realized, well, I was exposed to a lot of contemporary music because I was kind of open to it. Same thing with me playing with a bunch of string quartets or groups is because that's what I really wanted to do, So, and I played like in early music groups at IU, played some continuo parts, and which I also thought was awesome. And, and I took jazz improv from Dave Baker, who was there, so I was always interested. It was interesting. This is before Kronos. And so I was interested in all that stuff, but not, you know, I don't know. So Kronos just ended up being a perfect thing for me,
Mm,
and expanded like all that stuff. There's no way any other, I think, group that I could have been in would have had that possibility for me,
right.
because yeah, they're pretty amazing what they've done, really. So
Um,
yeah.
what was I going to ask
Sorry, well, I ramble on. Sorry.
you? No, no, no. I'm sorry. Um, oh, I was curious about, as someone who's worked on so many pieces that you were playing for the first time, and you were there as the piece was being developed, you got to know the composer, you know, and you got to know you you sort of knew the inside story of how the piece developed, um, whereas so many classical musicians are playing pieces, mostly pieces that were where they probably never met the composer or had a chance to talk about it. Or so, did you ever find that
Right.
that sort of knowing those stories was um, a detriment, or did it make it harder for you in a sense to play the piece, or was it always a plus?
Oh, to have the composer there and work with the
Well,
composer.
to know, how the evolution and kind of the backstory.
Oh, that was absolutely the best.
Mm,
Yeah, I mean, just think of it. I mean, you just know more about the piece. I even really liked it when we used to get scores from people, and of course they'd be handwritten
mm,
and they'd be hard to read, sometimes. And now, everything is digital and it's super easy to read. And I use it all the time myself. It's great. But I even realized when that happened, it was like, oh, you kind of lose something. You kind of lose
mm,
some of this character of the composer who's writing it down. And because the way they write it down is kind of revealing, actually.
mm,
It can be really lightly done, or it could be, you know, really chaotic, or or in the case of Morton Feldman, it was like really super methodical, which makes sense. I got all those repeats, and everything, but it was it was great, and I felt that kind of helped know more about the piece. So definitely, when you meet the composer, if you know any story about how it came to be, anything about it at all, I think is all really valuable information that you shouldn't be able to really detach from the piece. It is part of the whole thing. Definitely.
can you think of a piece that had a really interesting story, or
Well, like Terry's music, especially Terry Riley,
right?
and I'm sure you've probably heard a lot of these stories. I mean, when we first started working with Terry, because Terry, and you got to hand it to David. It was David who asked Terry, kept bugging him to write something down,
Mm-hmm.
because at that point Terry was teaching at Mills College too, which is where Kronos was, but he hadn't written anything down because he was studying with Pandit Pranath, who was an Indian, uh, North African Indian musician, who singer and amazing guy. So Terry was kind of into a different um, tradition there for a bit, and of course it only paid off because then when he started writing down music, of course all those years he spent doing that influenced his writing,
Mm.
and so and that's a good example of how you can't separate anything out of a composer's piece of music is part of their life, which is very complex. Everything, it's all part of it somehow. And so with Terry, you could really see that happening in a way. And now, I mean, look how much stuff Terry has written now. It's unbelievable,
Right.
So, but at the beginning, and one of the first times we went to his ranch, and we all stayed there, and then Terry wrote down these little 14 beat modules. And so then we all like took these modules, and then we sort of placed them, in an order, and certain things against each other, So we sort of were in on how he was making the piece,
Right. Right.
And yeah, and I'm sure that influenced how he wrote it, or then even wrote certain things the way we always played them. Once we, Kronos, you come up with an order, and that's what it is. I mean, there's once you decide, okay, this is it, it sort of was it. So, but then, and then also that's when we did G Song with him. The other one was called Sunrise of the Planetary Dream Collector.
Right.
Was the module thing. But then, I mean, G Song was really kind of modules also. But, and we did a kind of a similar thing actually with that too. So it was really great though. It was this weekend where we spent with him taking these, little snippets and putting them together and figuring out how to make a piece out of it. So that was a good one. Good piece.
So you had an amazing time with Kronos. Amazing career there. And I know that you, at some point during your being with Kronos, you found out that there was something wrong with you physically, or something was going wrong. When did you find that out, and how did that evolve?
All right. Well, I can tell you right when it was 19. Well, so 19. No, I do have to think about this a second. It's when I turned 40. So, 1996. I got like a flu sort of thing, and of course I kept playing. We had somebody, David Krakauer was coming from out of town, and we were doing a concert at UC Berkeley at Herbst Hall, and he was coming out and going to play that concert. And then we were going to record the piece at Skywalker, which we did, and we did all that. But I was sick, and I remember, before we went on stage in Berkeley, I was huddled up in a blanket, backstage. But then you go on stage, and this would happen all the time, and then you're under the lights, and it actually makes you feel better, So it's like, so I didn't think too much about it. But then right after that, I started having these problems with numbness especially on my right leg, but in both my legs sort of. And then I went to someone who at first thought it was Guillain-Barré, which is a related syndrome to MS, which is eventually what it was determined. It was multiple sclerosis. It was MS. So, so of course, that makes you think, well, okay, what am I going to do now? How am I going to deal with this? And I mean, I've been fortunate. Because now I've had it for like 25 years or something. And, certain things suck big time, of course, but then again, you learn a lot of stuff, and you learn how to deal with things. And I have to say, since I left Kronos, and I really did start doing more solo stuff and composing, which was really great. But really, there were two people who really influenced me, and they were both people who were handicapped. And one is Judy Smith, who at the time, and she only retired maybe 2 years ago, but was the director and also a dancer for the Axis Dance Company, which is in Oakland. And it's one of the if not the first dance company that worked with disabled and able-bodied dancers.
Okay.
She had lost the use of her legs. She'd had an accident when she was 17, and so she had been in a wheelchair for a really long time. And then there was another guy that I met who had an accident, BJ Miller, who Bruce Miller, who also had a horrific accident when he was 19. I think I met him when he was 30. And he lost both of his legs below his knees and one of his arms below this elbow. And but the thing about these people is they blew me away. They were just amazing, and it was like, wow, how, because it's a lot to deal with, and but then you also realize, well, everybody has a lot to deal with. And so you but I learned a lot from them in that way, and I think that because of that, it's my life is so much better than it would have been if I hadn't have known them and been influenced by them, and just get their knowledge of, their lives. And and they're very accomplished people. That's the thing too. So it's inspiring in that way.
I mean, did you have any thought at the time that you might want to leave Kronos, or that you might be ready to leave?
Yeah, I had, I think, and that's a tricky question as far as like, because there was a little bit of dissatisfaction going on there, a certain amount. I sort of felt like, well, I used to feel like it was so democratic. Each of the members of the group had their sort of expertise or their area that they were, we used to call Hank the bank, because he did financial stuff. Or John did a lot of recording. Dave, of course, did all the talking with composers, and I did a lot of grant writing and, stuff like this. So, so it was all, and we'd all make our decisions together and everything. But of course, things change. And as it developed, and it was getting to the point where David was making a lot more of the decisions before we necessarily even heard about things, So that was tricky, and I felt less satisfactory. It was less rewarding to be involved in. I really liked it that, I was really participating in a lot of the business of Kronos, and what we did, and, where we're going and all that. But we have to be clear. David had a very clear vision from the very beginning about the quartet, and I think then that had a lot to do with it too. It was probably, no, he wanted to do certain things a certain way, and that's what was going to be done. And so I was having a little hard time with that. I have to be honest. And even though, I mean, I can appreciate the whole thing and see how it evolved, and I'm actually happy that I'm not in the group. It's interesting when you see it evolve in a certain way, and it's great what they do, but I'm not sure I'd really want to be doing that exactly, which is okay too. There's a lot of different, I'm really happy that I actually ended up doing some solo stuff, and I really using a looper and starting to compose. And so I learned a lot more about a lot of stuff.
Right.
And I'm happy I did that. But it is no question in my mind that it was the MS that triggered that all, I don't know that I wouldn't have been able to leave the group if it hadn't been for me getting the MS. And once I got MS, it was like, this is not going to be good, so I think, we should, you guys do what you want to do, and I should get out of here, and I think it was the best decision, clearly, for everybody.
Okay. So now, you've started composing, and I assume there's other people who are playing your pieces, right?
Yeah, some people have played my pieces.
How does that feel to be the person who's writing something, but then, relying on other people to interpret your story or having your story kind of filtered through them?
Well, that's interesting actually, because you realize, or I realized, as a composer performer, really, a lot of the reasons sometimes people would really like my music was probably because of my performance.
Mm.
Whereas maybe it wasn't the best piece in the world, but probably the way I delivered it was more interesting in this case. Now, hopefully that has changed a little bit, but I think that's part of it. I mean, I it's a lot of the stuff I first started doing was multiple cello, and which, when you say what, I started out, I even played, when I first started playing the cello, and it was with this group of young kids who were violinists. And of course, I was playing the cello, so I was like the only bass player or whatever. But still, I was playing with other people. And then when my cello teacher at in Memphis, who I studied with for 5 years, he was so greatly influential, and he had all his students play together. So we did like 8 cello things, quartets, quintet, we, just cellos, all cellos, and so I've always had that sound in my ear,
Mm.
and I've really liked that. And the fact that the cello can, like, play all these different parts. And so when I started writing music, and I was, a lot of times I thought, oh God, I'm just recreating Kronos, because I would do 4 parts, and they were basically, because I can play bass and I can play the top line too, and everything in between.
Uh-huh.
So it was, that was a great thing though, and I really enjoyed doing it. And yeah, so
Did you um what did I want to ask you? Do you ever feel like your pieces that you write are stories? Do you feel like there's a story in the playing or in the delivery?
absolutely. My compositions have a lot to do with stories,
Mm.
and it was really interesting because, and Kronos just released, there was a little video that was to the first 3 minutes, I think, of the piece that I wrote for them for their 50 for the Future.
Right.
And it was a dancer, and I don't know if you saw it. It's very cool. I should send it to you if you haven't seen it. Um, and and so it was a filmmaker, and it was this dancer, and they, you know, did something to the first 3 minutes of this piece that I wrote for Kronos. But it's great, and it's like it really. I A lot of times I feel like, oh, my stuff works so much better with visuals.
Mm.
My music, it's really better with visuals than anything else. And I've done a lot of stuff with either film, or there was a guy who did a project for the Metropolitan in New York, and they were putting together all these different pieces from different sculpture exhibits, from really medieval to really current.
Hmm.
And so they were having different people do different things for certain sculptures, and so I did music for like 6 of them.
Mm.
And it was basically like, there was a really beautiful sculpture of a woman. She was an alabaster, black, alabaster, and she was naked, but she had a shawl around her. Um, and so, I mean, obviously she looks really cold, So I made a piece like, that they're only like were a minute to 2 minutes long. There was another one that was a wooden statue of, it was more medieval actually, and it was a prophet. And so then, then you can start to think about all the music in fourths and fifths, and so I mean, basically a lot of times visual stuff gives you a story, I guess is what it is. So it's like it's easier for me to write a piece of music if I have a story, if I have something that I'm thinking about, or even if it's a concept, you know, like there was a piece that I wrote early on with a looper, and it was because I was in my house waiting for someone, and now the piece is called Waiting, actually. And so I was writing this piece, and it was all to do with the fact that I was waiting, and it really sounds like that, Then there'll be a piece like Ink Blot that I did for Bruce Conner, who was a great artist, and he had some artwork that they were actual ink blots. I mean, they were amazing because they were very, complex. There were a bunch of them. And, obviously he had to be super, super meticulous to do this, So anyhow, so he asked me to write a piece. It was for the podcast for the museum. And so I started thinking, okay, well, what's an ink blot? It's a dot of ink that gets folded in half, keeps getting folded essentially, So then that gave me the concept to write that piece, and so it basically kind of opens like that and then closes, Um, but yeah, so definitely I'm all up for the story and music and the feeling or the meaning or the um concept. Those are all important to me.
Do you feel like the fact that you have MS, and that creates a story in itself, that comes with a certain story, a certain interest to certain people, um, but also creates certain reactions? I mean, do you ever feel like maybe the story of the MS is sort of interfering with your story, or that it's,
No, I don't feel that. I feel like it's just integrated. It is my story. It is part of my story now. There's no way of getting around it. And that's what it is.
uh,
And especially, because MS is the way it is, that it is a slow sort of decline, if you
mm,
will. Not everyone. I mean, it's so different for every person. But for me, I could definitely say it's been a slow decline. I mean, I was doing pretty good. I mean, I've always done really well. And then after about 20 years, I was gotten to the point where I was using 2 walking sticks, which was good, but I was falling a lot and stuff, So, get to the point you think, well, okay, maybe it's time I use a chair. So, so then now I'm in a chair, which I really like,
uh-huh,
but it has its problems too, then because you're not on your legs, and then that creates problems. And
mm,
so the whole thing, it's a journey, and I think I realized that from all these friends of mine too, who have had their journeys that have been way more disruptive, I would say, than
mm.
my journey, than MS for my journey, you know. Um, and also, just think they had this at a young age. That just boggles my mind. I think, well, at least I had 40 years of pretty normal, you know, whatever. But
Right.
so anyhow, uh, it's I think it just is integrated certainly at this point into, and I'm getting old now. I'm 64, so it's like, you know, things change. I'm happy to be here, with the birds and the roses and the blue sky. So,
But you still are able to play. I mean, you still have all the.
yeah, even though I'm playing a lot less now, and part of that, well, right here where I don't even have my cello actually up here, I
Mm.
have a little electric slide guitar, which is really fun.
Oh yeah.
But but yeah, now even because I have to say, because of this whole sitting thing, it's it's harder for me to sit normally. I'm a little imbalanced actually. So it actually has made my playing the cello a little harder. And this is really basically the last time I was really playing was March 15th of this year, because there was a thing I had done for somebody was doing a been a celebration really of Hamza El Din's life. And I worked with Hamza a lot, especially the last 10 years of his life, which would have been, in the 2000s for me. It's about 2010 or whatever. And I arranged his piece that Kronos played all the time, Escalade, but I arranged it for looper and cello so I could play it myself. And it was great. I played it a lot. And then I played with Hamza a lot. The two of us would play. So they wanted to do this celebration, but I said, well, I don't think I can do the looper thing anymore. That would be too much for me. Because, you have to use your feet,
Oh, I see.
and when I first, my right leg has always been worse.
Hmm.
And so when I first started using the looper, I even realized, oh, my right leg's not that great. So I had to learn to use my left, which I did. And that was fine. But now I wouldn't even be able to use my left,
Right.
So I thought, okay, but I'd really like to participate in this celebration. So why don't I make an arrangement for 4 cellos and we can play it live?
Hmm.
So basically, that's what we were going to do. And I had 3 of my buddies, cello buddies, and it was great. I did it, and then we rehearsed it, and it sounded great. And then, of course, the concert was supposed to be on March 22nd, I think, or 20th or something. So the 15th, I think, we rehearsed. That was the last rehearsal, and then the whole thing was canceled, of course. And we thought it might be, but it was great. So we had gotten together and worked on it and know that it worked. And
You did
so
good.
I was playing then, but that's a lot easier. It wasn't anything very difficult.
Hmm.
So
I'm not sure you can be able to answer this, but do you feel like that the voice that you play with is the same voice that you use in composing?
well, I'm sure it is. I've always thought of myself as a performer is probably much more advanced than my life as a composer.
Hmm.
I mean, I've written some things I really like, you know. Um, I mean, a lot of things but I think I knew myself as a performer for so long that, and I think people, have responded to my performing for so long that, that's maybe what I feel is my stronger aspect, even though not anymore, because I'm not really playing anymore, so there you go. um Changes, so I don't know, but it's hard for me to be as confident about my composing, I think, as I am confident about my performing, just because I think I performed for so long, you know and then, but now I've composed maybe 25 years, but
It's a long time.
yeah, but I've been playing for, how many, like 50 something. So, yeah.
What what do you think you'd like to have your story be from here? Do you have a picture of how you'd like things to play out?
Well, I've never been very concerned about leaving any kind of legacy or anything. It's never been my interest. I'm really happy, like with this young student when I see her kind of just developing and discovering things, you know. I really realized early on, oh, okay, well, she's not going to be a cellist like I was a cellist.
Mm.
You know, you can tell that's not her, you know, primary focus in the same way. I mean, she's learning all sorts of cool stuff, so she could end up doing something really amazing and actually even being a composer or something that, but I can't see her, you know, because there were certain pieces that I played when I was a kid, you know, they sort of take you through all these steps of pieces, and then, you know, things get more and more difficult. And, you know, and she, at a certain point, she was kind of like not as interested in that sort of thing.
Right.
So then I realized, well, that's okay. And then that's why we started kind of learning about other stuff, you
Mm.
know, which, so it'll be interesting to see what happens, you know, with her. But yeah, so, but that to me is probably the most important thing. I feel like, well, if I can help someone through their journey or whatever, you know, uh, that would be good. That's a good thing. But other than that, it's not like, you know, I'm really not so I'm not really into playing that much or performing at all now.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'm more like happy to pick blackberries and make blackberry cobbler, you know, or just made some blackberry bread pudding, you know. So I've become a homemaker, perhaps.
Yeah. You know, the whole time that we've been talking, the clouds have been moving over the sky, and so it's been like this constant
Oh,
changing picture over your head. Is very cool.
that's great. Well, it's because the ocean is out that way too.
Ah, okay.
So I think that really keeps it interesting. Yeah,
That seems like such an amazing spot.
it is. I'm very lucky. And this direction you can't see, but there's a little bird feeder that Dan made. And so there's like all these birds hanging out, you know.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So see, that for me that's good.
That's all you need, right?
Yep. Just about.
Well, it's so great to see you and talk to you, and really appreciate your taking the time to record this and think about stories with me.
Oh, well, it was great. It was great to think about all those things, you know.
Yeah,
So
thank you so much.
yeah, I'd like to hear your stories sometime.
But it's funny, um, when you were talking about this woman you grew up with. My mother was from the South, and her father was a minister, and she was also a musician. And she had this maid, the family maid. His name was Hattie. That was her nickname, I guess. And Hattie meant so much to her. You know, I think she was more of a parent to her than her parents in some respects.
Absolutely. Yep.
She had a lot of prejudices, you know. She had some prejudices that really turned me off. But at the same time, you know, this woman who was so important to her, you know, it was completely two halves of her mind, you know,
Yep.
the personal and the, you know, the generalizations, you know.
Yep. And that's the way it was in the South then. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
You know, that's how they looked at things. It's like the people who, you know, like in this case, Lily, and in my next door neighbor's case, Joe and Vera, those were like, yeah, your most beloved people. But then everybody else, it was like, you know, not at all. It's like, gosh, how come you guys can't see that's the same,
Right.
you know. That was amazing that they just couldn't see that's the same, you know, how you could love these people. I mean, and like you say, I'm sure with your mom, it was like, yeah, it was like the most important person in her life, you know, and or one of them.
Well, thank you so much, Joan. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, it's great talking to you.
Yeah.
Great to see you.
Have a great rest of the day, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Okay.
Enjoy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
The Story Talks Back is produced and hosted by Dave Stanton. The music you're hearing now was written and performed by Christopher Daydream. The theme music at the beginning of our show is an excerpt from Play by Merlin Twelfhoven, performed by Kronos Quartet as part of their 50 for the Future series. Please subscribe to The Story Talks Back on Podbean and check us out on Instagram. See you next time.